You'll be gone by sunrise. It wasn't a question. It was the kind of thing a woman says when she has already decided what is going to happen, and is simply informing the universe of her decision. The stranger looked at her across the kitchen table. He had a tin cup of coffee in his hands and 3 days of trailed dust on his coat, and an expression that suggested he was used to being told to leave and had stopped being offended by it a long time ago. "Yes, ma'am," he said. That was what he said at the table. What he said the next morning. Standing in her doorway with his hat in his hands and the first pink light of dawn behind him was something else entirely. And what she said back, that surprised her more than it surprised him. Her name was Hannah Reeve. She was 28 years old. She lived alone on 160 acres of homestead land in the Bitterroot Valley of Montana, 3 miles from the nearest neighbor and 7 miles from the town of Pine Hollow, in a single-room cabin her husband had built with his own hands the spring before he died. That was 3 years ago. In the 3 years since, she had buried him on the rise behind the cabin where the pines opened up and you could see the valley, and she had learned to do the work of 2 people with the body of 1, and she had stopped expecting visitors. She had stopped expecting most things. Actually, that was the part she didn't tell people. She had not stopped working. A homestead doesn't allow for that. A homestead requires you up at 4:30 in the morning whether you want to be or not. Requires you to feed the chickens and milk the goat and check the well and split the wood and mend the fence the deer had pushed through in the night and put up the preserves and patch the roof and tend the garden and ride the line of the property to make sure nothing had wandered through. A homestead is the most demanding employer a person can have, and it does not care about grief, and it does not care about exhaustion, and it does not care that the person you build it with is buried on a rise behind the cabin. It only cares that the work gets done. So Hannah Reeve did the work. She did the work every day for 3 years. And somewhere in the middle of those 3 years, she had become a person who did not expect kindness, did not expect company, and did not expect a man on a sorrel horse to come down her road in the gray light of an October evening with the wind picking up from the north and a storm visibly building behind him. She had been on the porch when she saw him. She had been splitting the last of the kindling for the night, and she had paused with the axe in her hand because the sound of hooves on her road was not a sound she heard often, and any sound she didn't hear often was a sound she paid attention to. He came down the road slowly, not the slow of a man who was lost, the slow of a man who was tired, and whose horse was tired, and who had been on the road for longer than he had planned. He pulled up at her gate. He didn't open it. He sat there on his horse and looked at her cabin, and then looked at her on the porch and tipped his hat in a way that was not asking for anything, but was acknowledging that he had arrived at someone's home, and the appropriate thing was to be acknowledged before going further. "Evening, ma'am," he said. She set the axe down against the woodpile. She did not walk closer. "Evening," she said. He was maybe 35, tall in the saddle, broad through the shoulders, dark hair beginning to show the first gray at the temples, a face that had been outdoors for most of its life and looked like it, weathered and lined around the eyes in the way faces get lined when a man has spent years squinting into sun and wind. A short beard, not unkempt, just a beard of a man on the trail who hadn't passed a town in a while. Brown leather coat, worn but clean. He held himself the way a man holds himself when he has been raised to be careful about how he occupies space around women who live alone. "I won't trouble you long," he said. "Storm's coming behind me from the north. I've been riding 3 days from Helena heading south. I'd be obliged if I could put my horse in your barn for the night. I'll sleep in the barn with him. I'll be gone before first light." Hannah looked at him. She looked at the sky behind him, which was a gray-black of a Montana storm that had already made up its mind. She looked at the horse, which had its head low and was breathing hard. She looked at the man, who was waiting without expectation, the way a man waits when he has asked for a thing and knows that no is a possible answer and is prepared for it. "You can put the horse in the barn," she said. "There's hay in the loft. You'll sleep at the table. The barn's no place for a man in a storm. I don't want to put you out, ma'am." "You're not putting me out. I'm deciding." He looked at her for a moment. Then he tipped his hat again. "Thank you," he said. "Hannah Reeve." "Eli Caldwell." "Mr. Caldwell." "Eli's fine." She didn't say his first name back. "Not yet." He put the horse in the barn the way a man puts his horse in the barn when his horse matters to him. She watched from the porch. She watched him brush the sorrel down with the curry comb from her wall, watched him check each of 4 hooves, watched him fill the water bucket from the well, and carry it without spilling, watched him fork hay down from the loft, and stand for a moment with his hand on the horse's neck, saying something she couldn't hear. She had been married to a man who treated horses well. You learn to recognize the ones who do. She went inside before he came out. She put another log on the fire and set the coffee on and pulled the second tin cup down from the shelf. The second cup, which had been on the shelf for 3 years and had not been used in any of them. She held it for a moment. Then she set it on the table. The storm hit 10 minutes after he came inside. It hit the way Montana storms hit, when they had been building all afternoon, with wind that pushed the windows in their frames and rain that turned to sleet within the first hour, and the particular kind of dark that comes when the clouds have closed off any remaining light from the sky. Eli Caldwell stood just inside her door with his hat in his hands and rain dripping off his coat, and the awareness of a man who is entering a woman's home for the first time and is being careful about every step. "There's a peg by the door for your coat," she said. "Boots by the fire. The water's hot if you want to wash up." He did each thing in order. He did not ask where things were. He looked, and he found, and he used what he needed and put it back exactly where it had been. She watched him do this without seeming to watch him. A man who lives alone learns certain habits. He puts things back. He doesn't leave things out. He doesn't assume. She had not expected to recognize those habits in someone else. She put bread and stew on the table. It was a stew she had made for herself that morning, venison and root vegetables and the herbs from her garden that she had dried in August. It was good stew. It was the kind of stew you make when you are cooking for one, but you have not given up on the idea that food should be made well. He sat down across from her. He waited. She realized after a moment that he was waiting for her to begin. She picked up her spoon. He picked up his. He ate the way a man eats who has been on the trail for 3 days and is hungry, but is not going to show it, which is to say slowly and with appreciation and with the kind of attention that says, "This was made by someone, and someone took care, and I am noticing. This is good stew, Mrs. Reeve." "Hannah! Hannah!" He said her name once, carefully, the way you say a name you intend to remember. "Thank you," she said. And then, because the silence felt like something that needed filling, "What takes you south?" He looked at his bread. "Looking for work," he said. "Cattle. Cattle. Horses. Whatever needs doing. I had a place outside Helena. A small place. I lost it." He said it without drama, the way a man says something true that he has stopped flinching from. "I'm sorry," she said. "My wife passed in the spring," he said. "Fever. The place was hers as much as mine. After she was gone, I didn't have the heart to keep it running. I sold it for less than it was worth to a man who would care for it. I've been on the road since August." He looked up at her. "I don't usually tell people that on the first night. I don't usually have people on the first night," she said. It came out before she had decided to say it. He almost smiled. "I'm sorry for what happened to you, too," he said. "I noticed the rise behind the cabin. The stones. I figured." She looked at her stew for a moment. She had not talked about Thomas with a stranger in 3 years. 3 years in November, she said. He was building the south fence. The horse threw him. He hit his head on a rock. I found him at dusk. Eli was quiet. He didn't feel the quiet. He let it be what it was. That, more than anything else, was what made her say the next part. "He built this cabin," she said. "He chose this land. He believed in it. He believed in us being here. After he died, I thought about going back east. I have a sister in St. Paul. She wrote for a year asking me to come." "What kept you?" "I don't know," she said. "I think I was afraid that if I left, the part of him that's still here would be alone." Eli set his spoon down. He looked at her across the table, the way you look at a person who has just said something you understand completely. "That's not a small thing to carry," he said. "No," she said, "it isn't. I want to stop here for a moment, because this is the part one think about. Not what he said the next morning. We'll get there. This. 2 strangers at a table. A storm outside. A bowl of stew between them. And one of them saying the true thing about why she stayed, and the other one not flinching from it, not trying to fix it, not offering advice, not telling her she should move on, just letting it be what it was. There is a kind of company that is not about saying anything. It is about not making a person say less than what is true. Eli Caldwell did that for Hannah Reeve at her own kitchen table on the first night they met. And she noticed, before we go further, I want to take a moment. From the United States to Australia, from Canada to the United Kingdom, from Ireland to South Africa, from Germany to the Philippines. Wherever you are tonight, thank you for sitting at this table with me. If this story is giving you a quiet evening, a like means more than you know. And tell me, what country are you listening from tonight? Drop it in the comments. I read everyone. I want to know where this voice is reaching. Now let's go back. Because Hannah Reeve made up the floor by the fire, and Eli Caldwell slept beside the embers, and in the morning, he said something neither of them was prepared for. She gave him blankets and a folded quilt and a place by the fire. She did not give him the bed. The bed was hers. The bed was where she had slept beside Thomas for 4 years, and where she had slept alone for 3, and there was no thought in her mind that any other arrangement was possible. He did not ask. He thanked her for the blankets and laid them out carefully on a rug in front of the fire and sat down on them to pull off his boots. And she said good night. And he said good night. And she went into the bedroom and closed the door. She lay in the dark and listened to the storm. She listened to the fire crackling in the front room. She listened to a man breathing in her house for the first time in 3 years and did not know what to do with the feeling that gave her. She had thought it would feel like an intrusion. It did not feel like an intrusion. It felt like the difference between a room with 1 lamp and a room with 2 lamps, which is not double the light. It is a different quality of warmth altogether. She thought about that for a long time. She thought about Thomas. She thought she should feel guilty about not feeling guilty. She didn't. Eventually she slept. She woke at 4:30, as she always did. The storm had passed. The cabin was quiet. The smell of coffee was in the air, which meant someone had built up the fire and put the coffee on, and that someone was not her. She sat up. She listened. He was in the kitchen, moving quietly, the kind of quiet a man practices when he knows a woman is sleeping and is trying not to wake her. She dressed. She came out. He was at the stove. He had the coffee made. He had brought in firewood from the porch and stacked it neatly by the hearth. He had her wash basin filled with hot water and a clean cloth folded beside it. He had taken nothing for granted and assumed nothing about what she would or would not want. And yet he had done all the small things she would have done for herself in the next 45 minutes anyway. He looked up when she came in. Morning. He said, "You're up early. Habit. I'll head out as soon as it's light enough to see the road. Storm dropped a lot. Roads will be slow." She went to the window. The world outside her cabin was white, not the soft white of a gentle snow. The hard white of storm that had piled up in drifts against the walls and the fence posts and the side of the barn. The road south was visible only as a slightly lower line where the snow hadn't drifted as deep. He stood beside her at the window. "That'll be hard riding," he said. "It'll be impossible riding." He didn't argue. He stood there for a moment looking at the snow and at the road that wasn't really a road anymore. "I can try, ma'am." "You can't try. Your horse will founder in the first half mile. You'll be on foot by noon and you don't know the country." "No, ma'am, I don't." She looked at him. This man who had not slept in her bed, who had built up her fire, who had said the true thing about his wife at the table the night before, who had not flinched from the true thing she said back. This man who was prepared to try to ride south through 3 feet of fresh snow on a tired horse, because he had said he would be gone by sunrise, and he was a man who kept his word. "Sit down," she said. "I'll make breakfast." "Hannah, sit down." He sat down. She made breakfast. Eggs from her hens. Bacon she cured herself. Biscuits with the gravy she could make in her sleep. More coffee. Butter she had churned on Tuesday. She set it on the table. She sat down across from him. They ate. Halfway through the meal, she said, "You can stay until the snow lets a road through. That might be 3 days." "I know. You don't know me. I watched you with your horse last night. I watched you in this kitchen. I have known you long enough." He set his fork down. He looked at her with the expression of a man who is not sure what to do with what he is hearing, because he has gone too long without hearing it. "Thank you," he said. "You'll work for your keep," she said. "I have things that need doing." Two pairs of hands are better than one. Tell me what needs doing. She told him. The list was long. He listened to every item without interrupting and then said, I'll start with the woodpile and work my way down. She nodded. She thought that was the end of it. It wasn't. 3 days. That was what she had said. It was 3 days before the road south was passable. In those 3 days, Eli Caldwell did more work than she had done in the previous month. He split a full cord of wood and stacked it under the eaves where it would stay dry. He patched the section of roof on the barn that she had been meaning to get to since August. He cleared the snow from her well house and reinforced the door that had been sagging on its hinges. He rebuilt the section of fence the deer had been getting through. He brought in water. He chopped kindling. He fed the chickens. He milked the goat when she let him, which was on the second day, and the goat, who was particular about strangers, stood perfectly still for him, which Hannah noticed and did not comment on. He worked from before dawn to after dark. He did not complain. He did not ask for praise. He did the work the way Thomas had done it, which was to say, with the steady absorbed attention of a man who finds satisfaction in things being done right. In the evenings, he came in and washed up and sat at her table, and they ate together and they talked. They talked about cattle prices and weather in the books on her shelf, which he had noticed and asked about, and her father, who had been a preacher in Ohio, and his mother, who had been a midwife in Tennessee, and the place outside Helena that he had loved and lost, and Thomas, whom she could now speak without the words catching in her throat. She could not remember the last time she had talked this much. She could not remember the last time she had wanted to. On the third night the road was clear. They both knew it. Neither of them said it during dinner. After dinner, he washed the dishes and she dried them, and they did this side by side at her counter, without speaking. The way two people who have fallen into a rhythm do not need to discuss the rhythm in order to keep it. When the dishes were done, he stood at the counter with the dish towel in his hand and said, Hannah, I know, she said. The road's clear. I know. She didn't turn around. She kept her hands on the counter and looked at the wall. I'll be gone at first light, he said. You said that the first night. This time I mean it the same way I meant it then. I never wanted to overstay. She turned around. He was standing there with a towel in his hand and an expression on his face that she had not seen on a man's face in 3 years. The expression of a man who is about to say something he is not sure he has the right to say. Don't say it tonight, she said. Say what? Whatever you're about to say. Don't say it tonight. Say it in the morning. He looked at her for a long moment. Why? Because tonight I'm tired and I'll think you're saying it because the storm gave us 3 days and the road is clear and you feel something that will go away on the trail. Tomorrow morning, you'll have your boots on and your horse saddled and your hand on the door, and whatever you say then, I'll believe. He nodded slowly. That's fair, he said. Sleep by the fire, she said. Yes, ma'am. She went to her bedroom. She closed the door. She lay in the dark and did not sleep for a very long time. She woke at 4:30. The fire was built up. The coffee was made. Eli Caldwell was at her table with his coat on and his hat beside him, and his saddlebags packed by the door, and his horse, she could see through the window, was already saddled and tied to the porch rail. He stood when she came in. She poured herself coffee. She sat down across from him. They drank in silence for a moment. The first pink light of dawn was beginning to come through the window. He set his cup down. Hannah Reeve, he said. Eli Caldwell. She had said his first name. It was the first time. He noticed. I came here 3 nights ago thinking I'd be gone by sunrise, he said. I've thought about leaving every morning since. I've been ready to leave every morning. And every morning I found another reason to stay one more day. I'm out of reasons this morning. The road is clear. My horse is ready. I've worked off what I owe you and more. He looked at her. I have nothing to offer you, he said. I had a place once, and I don't have it anymore. I have a horse and a saddle, and what's in those bags? I'm 36 years old, and I'm starting over, and I don't know where. I have no business asking you anything. He paused. But I'm going to ask you anyway, because if I ride away from this door without asking it, I'll spend the rest of my life regretting that I didn't. He took a breath. Could I stay? Not could I come back. Not could I write to you. Could I stay? The question sat on the table between them, like a third cup of coffee neither of them had poured. Hannah Reeve looked at this man at her table. This man who had asked for a barn and accepted a floor. This man who had built up her fire every morning and never once made her feel that he had taken liberties with her house. This man who had spoken honestly about his wife at the table on the first night. This man who had let her speak honestly about Thomas without trying to fix what could not be fixed. This man who had worked 3 days like he was building towards something and then asked permission to keep building. She thought about Thomas. She thought about the rise behind the cabin where the pines opened up. She thought about how Thomas had been the kind of man who would have liked Eli Caldwell, who would have shaken his hand at the door and said, "Come in," who would have understood without needing to be told that a person doesn't replace a person, that a new chapter doesn't erase the previous one, that the heart is not a room with limited space, but a house with many rooms, and grief lives in one of them, and joy can live in another, and they do not have to fight for the same air. She thought about how she had stopped expecting things 3 years ago. She thought about the fact that she had stopped expecting a kindness that did not come at a cost, and that for 3 days she had been receiving exactly that kindness, and that some part of her had been waiting for the catch, and that the catch had not come, because there was no catch. There was just this man, asking if he could stay. "On what terms?" she said. He met her eyes. "On any terms you set," he said. "I'll sleep in the barn. I'll build my own cabin on the back of your land, if you'll let me. I'll work for wages and we'll be neighbors, and I won't ask for anything more than what you want to give. Or," he stopped. He looked at her steadily. "Or we can take our time and see what this is, and at the end of whatever time you need, you'll tell me, and whatever you tell me I'll honor." She was quiet. The pink light at the window had become gold. She thought about what to say. She thought about how she had told him last night that whatever he said in the morning, she would believe. She thought about whether she had meant that. She had. "Stay," she said. He didn't move for a moment. "Stay. Stay," she said. "Not in the barn. In the room I'll fix up off the kitchen. The small one Thomas built for a study. We'll take our time. We'll see what this is. And when we know, we'll know." "Hannah." "And Eli." "Yes. Don't thank me for this. Don't make it a debt. If you stay because you want to. If you go because you want to. There's no owing here." He nodded. He nodded the way a man nods when he's been given something he doesn't have words for and is choosing not to fumble for words that wouldn't be enough. "I'll stay," he said. He unsaddled the horse. He carried his saddlebags back into the cabin. He hung his coat on the peg by the door, the same peg he had used 3 nights ago when he first walked in, and this time it was not a temporary placement. It was just where his coat belonged. She watched him do this and felt something she had not felt in 3 years. Not happiness, exactly. Something quieter. The sense of a held breath being released slowly. The sense of a door opening in a room you didn't know had a door. She went to the kitchen and started another pot of coffee, because the first one was almost gone, and a household with 2 people in it needs more coffee than a household with 1, and she would need to learn this rhythm again, and she found she did not mind learning it. He stayed. Through October he stayed, and through the first heavy snows of November, and into December when the valley locked down into its deep winter, and the days were short, and the nights were long, and the fire in her cabin burned from dawn to dawn, and someone was always there to feed it. He slept in the small room off the kitchen. He kept his word about taking their time. In the evenings they read aloud to each other. He had a low, careful reading voice that she liked listening to. They played checkers on a board. He carved for her from a piece of cedar. They talked about everything and they sat in silence, often, and the silence was not empty. On the rise behind the cabin where Thomas was buried, Hannah went up alone on a clear day in late November. She brushed the snow from the headstone. She stood there for a long time. She talked to Thomas. She did not say what she said out loud, because there was no need. When she came back down the hill, Eli was on the porch chopping wood. He looked up and saw her face and didn't ask anything. He just nodded. She nodded back. That was the whole conversation, and it was enough. They married in May. There was no church wedding. There was no town gathering. There was a Sunday morning in the wildflower meadow on the south end of the property, with the snowmelt running clear in the creek and the Bitterroot Mountains showing their late snow, and a circuit preacher named Reverend Hollis, who came out from Pine Hollow, because Eli had ridden in to ask him, and Hannah had ridden in to second the asking. Her neighbor, Mrs. Greer, came as a witness. The goat watched from a fence line with the personal interest of an animal who feels she has been part of this story from the beginning. Hannah wore the dress she had been married in the first time. She had thought she would never wear it again. She wore it because Thomas had liked it, and because she had decided, somewhere along the way, that wearing it now was not a betrayal of Thomas, but a way of bringing him along. Eli understood without being told. He told her so afterward on the porch, with the evening coming down soft over the valley. Thomas was a good man, he said. I wish I had known him. You would have liked him, she said. I know I would have. He would have liked you. I hope so. He would have. I know it. Their son was born in the following March. They named him Samuel, for Eli's father, who had been a kind man and a hard worker, and had died when Eli was 16, and had never gotten to see what kind of man his son had become. Samuel had Eli's dark hair and Hannah's gray eyes and a laugh that arrived early and often. Mrs. Greer came to help with the birth. Eli paced the porch in the way men pace porches when they are trying very hard to be calm about a thing they cannot do anything about. When Mrs. Greer came out and told him he had a son, Eli sat down on the porch steps and put his hands over his face and did not move for several minutes. When he went inside, Hannah was holding the baby. She looked up at him. Come meet your son, she said. He came. He sat on the edge of the bed. He took the baby in his arms with the careful astonishment of a man who has been given a thing he did not believe he would ever be given. Hannah watched his face. She thought about a stranger at her gate in the gray light of an October evening, with a storm building behind him, asking if he could put his horse in her barn. She thought about how many small decisions had stood between that moment and this one. She thought about how every one of them had been hers to make, and how she had made each one, and how each one had brought her here. The years were good, not without hardship. Montana is not a country that allows for years without hardship. There were bad winters and lean years, and the time the barn burned down in 1891, and the time Samuel got pneumonia at 4 years old, and Hannah did not sleep for 9 nights. But the years were good. They added to the house. They added a real second bedroom for Samuel and a proper porch with a swing that Eli built and a kitchen wing with a bigger stove. The homestead grew. Cattle, horses, hay in the south meadow. A second hand named Daniel Ross, who lived in the bunkhouse Eli built behind the barn, on the rise behind the cabin. Thomas's grave stayed where it was. Hannah went up once a month. She brought flowers in summer and brushed snow in the winter and talked to Thomas about the news. Eli never went with her. He understood that the rise was hers alone. But every time she came down the hill, he was on the porch or in the barn or in the kitchen or somewhere within sight of the house. He was always there when she came back. That was its own kind of vow, and they both understood it. He had asked if he could stay. That was the question at the center of this story, not the bigger questions, not the will you marry me, the do you love me, the grand declarations that stories like to end on. Just, could he stay? A question a man asks when he has nothing to offer except himself, and is brave enough to offer himself anyway. And the answer she gave him was not yes in the way movies make it yes. It was yes in the way real people say yes. With conditions, with caution, with the wisdom of someone who has loved before and lost, and is not going to pretend that what she is being offered is anything other than what it is. She said, stay. We'll see what this is. There is no owing here. That kind of yes is harder than the movie yes. It is also more honest, and it is the kind of yes that lasts. I think about this story when I think about second chances. How the second chance does not look the way the first one looked. It cannot. The first one was given to you by life when you had no scars. The second one is offered to you by a person who has scars of his own, and you receive it with scars of your own. And the deal you make with each other is not the deal of two unmarked people imagining the future. It is the deal of two people who know exactly how the future can break, and are choosing to build it anyway. That is a braver thing than the first time. It does not get celebrated in songs. It gets celebrated in mornings. A man at the fire before you wake up. A pot of coffee made by someone who knew you would want it. A second cup on the shelf that gets used now. A house with a different quality of light, because 2 lamps are burning in it instead of 1. Hannah Reeve thought a stranger would leave by sunrise. He asked if he could stay. She thought about it. She said yes. That's the whole story. Most good stories are that simple when you get to the center of them. A question asked honestly. An answer given honestly. The quiet courage of two people deciding to build something on top of what they've already lost, knowing exactly what it cost them to lose it the first time. If a stranger ever asks you for shelter, give it if you can. If a stranger ever asks if they can stay, take your time, ask your questions, set your terms, and then, if your heart tells you it's right, say yes. Some of the best things in a life arrive in the gray light of an October evening on a tired horse with a storm building behind them. You just have to be willing to open the gate. Thank you for sitting at this table with me tonight. Wherever you are, from Montana to Manchester, from Sydney to San Antonio, from Ireland to India, I am grateful you were here. If this story gave you something to carry into your evening, a like means more than you know. And I want to know, what country are you listening from tonight? Drop it below. I read everyone. Until next time, keep the fire burning. And if a stranger comes to your gate, listen carefully to what he asks. The answer you give might change everything.